She was mocked by everyone for playing with an autistic girl, not knowing she is the Mafia boss heiress. Maya had always believed in kindness, that a simple act of compassion could change the course of a life. But when she befriends a lonely autistic girl in the park, little does she know that this innocent gesture will pull her into a dangerous underworld of mafia politics, power struggles, and brutal loyalty. The girl Aria isn't just any child. She's the heir to one of the most feared crime families in the city, and her safety is worth more than Maya could ever imagine. Now, Maya must decide. Protect Aria at all costs, even if it means surrendering her own soul to a world of violence and darkness, or walk away, leaving the little girl she's come to love exposed to the ruthless forces that lurk in the shadows. The clock is ticking, and in the world of the Moretti family, no one can be trusted, not even Maya herself. Before we start, let me know in the comment section where in this beautiful world you are watching from, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to this amazing channel. That way, YouTube will keep showing you wonderful stories from this channel. Now, let's begin. Maya had always been the quiet one, the kind of person who would rather sit in the back of the room than draw attention to herself. Growing up, she learned to embrace her introverted nature, finding comfort in the soft hum of routine and the company of children. Unlike the others, Maya never understood the appeal of socializing just for the sake of it. People often misunderstood her, calling her aloof or standoffish. But she wasn't. She was just different. Her empathy, her ability to feel for others, especially for those who seemed to be overlooked, set her apart from her peers. It wasn't that she didn't want friends, it was simply that the world she inhabited often seemed loud and harsh, while her heart longed for calm and connection in quieter corners. One of those corners was the local park. It was a modest place, not too far from her small apartment, and it became her sanctuary during moments of stress. After long days working at the small bookstore in town, Maya would retreat there to escape the noise of the city, to sit by herself and watch the children run and play. She found peace in the simplicity of their laughter, the unburdened joy of innocence. The park was where she could forget about the judgment of her coworkers or the pressure to fit into a world that often felt too big, too demanding. This particular afternoon, the sun shone brightly over the park, casting long shadows as children ran around, their excited voices filling the air. Maya settled onto a bench near the corner of the playground, her legs stretched out in front of her, a book clutched in her hands. But it wasn't the pages that captured her attention. It was a small girl sitting alone at the far end of the playground. The girl, perhaps no older than 6 or 7, was sitting with her knees pulled up to her chest, her back hunched in a way that made Maya's heart ache. Her small hands moved in repetitive motions, and she seemed completely absorbed in herself, completely disconnected from the chaos unfolding around her. The other children were too busy running in packs, climbing the jungle gym, and laughing as they chased one another. But this girl, with her dark, messy hair and mismatched clothes, didn't seem to fit in. Maya noticed the way the other children kept their distance, some of them even sneering at her, whispering behind their hands. Maya had seen it before, the way people ignored those who didn't fit the mold. People like this little girl were often forgotten or ridiculed. Maya's heart tightened. She felt a deep, familiar pull. She had always been drawn to children like this, those who didn't fit into the neat little boxes the world tried to place them in. She had worked with kids with special needs before, and though she wasn't a trained therapist, she knew the value of simply sitting with them, of offering a smile, a gesture of friendship. With a quiet resolve, Maya set her book down and stood, her sneakers brushing against the gravel as she made her way toward the girl. She didn't know why she felt compelled to approach her. Maybe it was the way the girl's hands twitched restlessly, or the sadness that seemed to hang in the air around her. But Maya knew instinctively that this girl was not being seen, and that was something Maya could fix. "Hey there," Maya said softly as she approached, kneeling down to the girl's level. "My name's Maya. Would you like to play with me?" The girl looked up, her wide brown eyes filled with hesitation. Maya smiled gently, not rushing her. She knew that sometimes it took time for children to trust. "I'm Aria," the girl said in a small, quiet voice. Her tone was distant, like she was unsure of how to interact, but there was something about her that was profoundly aware, too. She didn't immediately shy away from Maya's presence, but she didn't move either. Instead, Aria's hands continued their motion, fingers flicking against the fabric of her pants in a rhythmic pattern. Maya tilted her head, watching the movement. She understood, she had seen it before. It was comforting for Aria, a way to manage her anxiety, to bring order to her mind. It was a sign of her unique way of experiencing the world, something that Maya could relate to. She had always been a quiet observer, finding solace in the small details that others missed. "Do you like building things?" Maya asked, taking a step closer, hoping to bridge the gap. She noticed a half-constructed sandcastle nearby, its crumbling edges a sign that it had been abandoned long ago. "I love building things too. Want to build a castle with me?" Aria blinked, her fingers pausing in their movement. Then, almost hesitantly, she nodded. Maya smiled warmly, standing up and offering her hand. "I promise it'll be fun," she said softly. It wasn't much, just an invitation to play, but to Maya it felt like a small victory. And to Aria, it was the start of something new. She took Maya's hand, the movement tentative but real, and together they walked toward the pile of wet sand. For the first time in what seemed like forever, Maya felt the stirrings of something more than just pity. She felt like she was truly seeing Aria. For the next hour, Maya and Aria worked side by side, building their little castle. Maya guided Aria's hands gently, helping her place sand in a small mound, but Aria's focus was clear. She was meticulous, precise, and lost in her own world. Maya didn't mind. She respected the quiet concentration. She simply let Aria lead, following her cues. As they built, Aria's lips occasionally curled into a shy smile, and Maya's heart swelled with quiet joy. The other children had long since stopped playing. Some of them had gathered in a group, gossiping and pointing in their direction. Maya could hear their voices, mocking her choice to play with the weird girl. "She's always alone," one of the boys said. "Does she even talk? What's the point?" Another girl giggled, her voice dripping with disdain. "Weird," she muttered. Maya ignored them. She had learned long ago to tune out the cruelty of others. In that moment, it didn't matter. All that mattered was Aria. As long as she could see the shy smile creeping onto the little girl's face, everything else faded into the background. What Maya didn't know was that her simple act of kindness, the choice to sit down beside a lonely child, would set off a chain of events that would alter her life forever. Aria was not just any child. She was the daughter of someone far more powerful than Maya could ever imagine. The Mafia world, its secrets, and its dangers were closer to Maya than she could ever realize, and soon she would find herself deeply entangled in that world. But for now, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across the park, Maya and Aria were simply two people, lost in the innocence of their shared moment. And in that simplicity, a bond was forged, one that neither of them would ever break. The kindness that Maya showed that day would change everything. Maya had always been someone who blended into the background, a quiet observer. But that afternoon at the park, as she sat next to Aria on the edge of the sandbox, something felt different. The warmth of the sun on her skin, the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. It should have been peaceful, but the weight of the children's stares was unmistakable. It started slowly, like a whisper in the wind, but soon Maya felt their eyes on her, their laughter rippling through the air. Aria, absorbed in the rhythm of her hands as she built a small mound of sand, didn't seem to notice. But Maya felt it, the judgment, the harshness, and the mocking whispers from behind her. She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the girl beside her, but the words drifted to her ears, cutting through the moment like a knife. "What's she doing with her?" A boy from the nearby swing set sneered, his voice carrying a little too loudly. "She's like, totally weird." Another child chimed in, a girl Maya had seen before, her face scrunched in disgust. "I wouldn't hang out with her. What's the point of being with someone like that?" Maya's heart sank, and for a brief moment she hesitated. Was this really worth it? Was her kindness to Aria making her just as weird as they said? The thoughts swirled in her mind, but then she looked at Aria, whose small face was lit up by a smile as she pushed a pile of sand into a neat little pile. Aria's world was small, quiet, and ordered in ways Maya had only begun to understand. She wasn't weird. She was simply different, and that was something Maya would never apologize for. Yet, The weight of those stares lingered. Maya forced a smile, shaking off the cruel words and focusing on the girl in front of her. Aria had no idea what was happening, what the other kids were saying, and Maya was determined to keep it that way. But as the sun dipped lower in the sky, and the playground emptied, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. She had crossed an invisible line, one that might cost her more than just a few passing glances. The following days at school were a stark contrast to the peaceful hours Maya spent with Aria at the park. The whispers, once faint, had become louder, more insistent. The moment Maya stepped into the classroom, she could feel it. The judgmental glances, the hushed conversations that stopped when she entered the room. It didn't take long for her to understand what was happening. Her classmates had begun to talk, to gossip about her, about the girl she spent time with. The ridicule had moved beyond the park and seeped into the halls of her school. "Did you hear? Maya was with that girl again yesterday." A girl in her history class, Sarah, said in a voice just loud enough for Maya to hear. "She's always hanging out with the weird one. I heard she doesn't even talk properly. How does Maya put up with it?" Another voice chimed in from behind. "It's like she's asking for attention, playing the savior. What a loser." Maya gripped her books tighter, her fingers turning white from the pressure. She had always prided herself on being kind, on seeing the value in every person, no matter their differences. But now, with every word, every glance, that pride felt like a burden. She didn't belong with them. She didn't belong in the world of cliques and easy friendships, where the most important thing was popularity and fitting in. She was too much of an outsider now, a target in a world that demanded conformity. That afternoon, as Maya walked down the hallway toward her next class, she passed by a group of her peers gathered by the lockers. She caught snippets of their conversation, fragments that cut deeper than the teasing in the park. "Yeah, I heard she spends all her time with Aria. Why would you want to be friends with someone who can't even communicate normally? I think it's all for attention. She's just too soft. Everyone knows you can't hang out with people like that." Maya's heart pounded as she forced herself to keep walking, to ignore the whispers that seemed to follow her like shadows. She'd never felt so alone in her life. She could feel the sting of their words, could hear the judgment in their tone. They didn't see Aria the way she did. They didn't see the kindness that Aria offered, the little moments of connection, the trust that was building between them. All they saw was someone who didn't fit into the mold. And suddenly, Maya felt like she didn't fit either. By the end of the week, the teasing had escalated. It wasn't just whispers anymore. Maya had been called weird to her face several times, and some of the girls from her class had started to ignore her completely. She would sit alone at lunch, picking at her food, her mind drifting back to the moments spent with Aria, where the world felt simpler and kinder. But that Saturday, as she walked into the park to meet Aria, Maya was faced with a new challenge. An all-too-familiar one. The other children had gathered in the center of the park, laughing and playing, but this time they weren't just whispering. They were openly mocking her. "You're still with her?" a boy from school, Kyle, said as Maya neared the sandbox. His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "I thought you were too good for playing with this special girl, Maya." Another girl, Lucy, snickered. "I bet she's just doing it for the attention. Pretending to be the hero." Maya felt the burn of embarrassment wash over her. Her face flushed, her stomach twisted in knots. She had never been good at standing up for herself. Not like this. Not when every part of her wanted to retreat, to disappear. But then she looked at Aria, who was sitting quietly at the edge of the sandbox, watching the children but not engaging. The small girl's innocent face stared back at her, trusting and calm, completely unaware of the cruelty being directed at them both. Maya inhaled deeply, her hands trembling at her sides. This was it, the moment where she could either give in to the pressure and walk away or stand tall, even if it meant facing the cruelty head-on. The mocking laughter echoed in her ears, but she forced herself to take another step forward. "Aria isn't a joke," Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt. "She's not the one who's weird. You are for treating her like this." The group fell silent, a few faces twisting in surprise, others in disbelief. Maya didn't back down. She couldn't. The last thing she was going to do was abandon Aria, especially when the little girl had finally started to trust her. The boy, Kyle, sneered and walked away, but the damage was done. The other children muttered to each other, casting Maya sidelong glances as they scattered. Maya stood tall for a moment longer, her heart racing. She knew the mockery wasn't over, but for the first time in days, she didn't feel like she was the one in the wrong. Aria needed her, and that was all that mattered. Despite the cruel words, despite the growing isolation Maya felt, something inside her began to change. As days passed, she continued visiting Aria at the park, despite the stares, despite the whispers. But something else was happening, something quiet but profound. Aria, who had once seemed so distant and unresponsive, began to seek out Maya's company more and more. One afternoon, as Maya sat beside her, watching Aria gently push sand through her fingers, the little girl looked up at her with a soft, hesitant expression. "Play with me?" Aria asked in a voice so small that Maya almost didn't hear her. Maya's heart swelled. It was the first time Aria had asked for anything, the first time she had made a direct connection without Maya prompting her. Maya smiled brightly and nodded, sitting down beside her. "I'd love to," Maya said softly. For the next hour, Maya and Aria built sandcastles, their fingers working together as the world around them faded away. Maya's patience and kindness were finally being reciprocated. And as the other children continued to watch from a distance, Maya realized that despite the mockery, despite the cruel judgments, she was doing the right thing. Aria needed her, and that was a bond that nothing, not the whispers, not the taunts, could ever break. For the first time in days, Maya felt at peace. She had made a difference no matter what anyone else thought. And in the eyes of the little girl beside her, Maya saw something that no one else could: acceptance. The sun was setting low on the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the park. It had become a ritual for Maya. Every Saturday afternoon, she would meet Aria at the sandbox. The park was quieter at this time, the midday rush of families and children long gone, leaving just the two of them, lost in their own little world. Aria had become less withdrawn, her once solitary and repetitive behavior giving way to moments of quiet connection. Maya would watch with a sense of pride as Aria slowly engaged with the environment around her. The world of the playground was becoming her world, too. Today, as Maya sat cross-legged beside Aria, their sandcastle growing higher with each handful of sand, something felt different in the air. A strange tension, like the shift of a storm before it broke. She couldn't quite place it, but there was an odd stillness in the atmosphere, as if something, or someone, was watching them. Maya pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on Aria, who was humming quietly, her small hands carefully shaping the sand. For a moment, Maya allowed herself to relax, feeling a quiet joy in their shared silence. But that peace was soon shattered by the unmistakable sound of a car pulling up nearby. A sleek, black sedan rolled into the parking lot near the edge of the park. The engine idled, and two men in dark suits stepped out of the vehicle. Maya didn't notice them at first, distracted by Aria's soft voice as she mumbled something about her sandcastle. But when one of the men approached the playground, his sharp black suit gleaming in the sunlight, Maya's senses immediately went on alert. She had seen men like this in movies. Polished, imposing figures with an aura of quiet authority. Her instincts flared, and she instinctively moved to stand, her body tense. Aria, who hadn't noticed, continued her task, her focus entirely on the task in front of her. "Maya Williams," the first man called, his voice cold but polite. Maya froze at the sound of her name. She turned toward the voice, meeting the eyes of the man who had spoken. He was tall, with dark hair and a face that seemed almost too perfect. Sharp cheekbones, a jawline like marble. There was something unsettling about his calm demeanor, something that sent a shiver down her spine. The man's eyes were a dull gray, unblinking and sharp as he continued to stare at her. "Yes," Maya replied, her voice small but steady. She tried to keep her calm, but her heart was already racing. What did they want with her? "My name is Marco," the man continued, his accent faint but noticeable. "I work for Signora Moretti. The boss would like to speak with you." Maya blinked in confusion. Signora Moretti? The name meant nothing to her. She glanced around the park, hoping for some kind of help or guidance, but the only other people around were a few distant joggers. She felt a growing sense of unease in her stomach, like the moment before a thunderstorm, when the world seems to hold its breath. What does she want with me? Maya asked, her voice wavering slightly. She tried to hold her ground, but her mind was racing. Who was this woman? And why was she sending strangers to speak with me? The boss has taken a particular interest in you, Marco said, his face betraying no emotion. He was professional, efficient. It's about Aria. At the mention of Aria's name, Maya felt her pulse quicken. She turned to look at the little girl beside her. Aria was still completely absorbed in her sandcastle, her back to the approaching men. Maya's throat tightened as the realization hit her. This isn't just some friendly chat. Is something wrong with Aria? Maya asked, her voice sharp with concern. She stood up quickly, casting a quick glance at the suited men. She's just a little girl. She's not bothering anyone. No, Marco interrupted, shaking his head as if to reassure her. Nothing is wrong with the girl. It's just that her mother would like to speak with you. His words were firm, yet they held a weight Maya didn't understand. Maya hesitated. Aria's mother? Had she been watching them all along? Maya glanced at Aria again. The little girl continued to hum, lost in her own world, completely unaware of the men closing in on them. Please, Miss Williams, Marco said, his voice softening just a fraction. We're only here to escort you. If you could come with us, Signora Moretti would be very grateful. The words hung in the air like an unspoken threat. Maya felt her stomach churn. Something about this didn't feel right. She had heard of powerful people, of course, everyone had. But this felt different, like stepping into a world she wasn't equipped to understand. What did a mafia boss want with her? I'm not sure, Maya stammered, unsure of how to handle the situation. The men were so calm, so poised. She felt out of place, standing there in her casual clothes, her heart thumping loudly in her chest. I don't even know who Signora Moretti is. Why would she want to talk to me? Marco's face remained unreadable, but his gaze flickered briefly toward Aria, still unaware of the conversation. It is not for us to question why, Miss Williams. Only to deliver the message. Please, we ask that you come with us. Maya's mind was racing. She felt the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. This doesn't make sense. Why would a mafia boss care about me? About Aria? Just a moment, Maya said, her voice trembling slightly. She took a step back, pulling her phone out of her pocket and dialing her best friend, Sam. She needed advice, something to ground her in this moment of surrealism. As the phone rang, she kept her eyes trained on the men. They hadn't moved, hadn't said a word, their presence hovering over her like a storm cloud. Hey Maya, Sam's voice broke through the static, a welcomed sound. What's up? Sam, Maya said, her voice tight. Some men just approached me at the park. They said they work for someone called Signora Moretti. They want me to go with them. Do you know who that is? I don't know what to do. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Maya, listen to me. Sam's voice became urgent, almost frantic. Signora Moretti. She's not just anyone. She's the head of one of the most powerful families in the city. You don't mess with them, okay? Stay away from them. Maya's heart sank, her body stiffening. What do you mean, don't mess with them? What does she want with me? Why are they coming for me? Sam's voice dropped to a whisper. I don't know, but if they're asking you to meet with her, it's serious. Whatever you do, be careful. Don't go alone. But before Maya could respond, the call abruptly ended with a click. She stared at the screen, her mind reeling. The weight of Sam's warning hit her like a freight train. She felt her legs go weak beneath her. A part of her wanted to refuse, to walk away, to take Aria and just leave the park. But another part, a dangerous part, knew she didn't have that luxury anymore. The men were waiting. Silent, poised and patient. Maya took a deep breath, steadying herself. Okay, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I'll come. But I need to bring Aria with me. Marco's gaze flickered to the little girl, then back to Maya. "That will not be necessary. We only require your presence." Maya bit her lip, but there was no turning back now. The world was shifting around her, and she could feel herself being pulled into a narrative she didn't understand. One thing was clear: she was about to enter a world of power and danger, and she had no idea what the cost would be. As Maya followed Marco toward the sleek black car, the park fading behind her, a shiver ran down her spine. Something was unfolding, something that would change everything. And she had no choice but to face it. The car ride was silent, except for the soft hum of the engine as it carried Maya through the unfamiliar streets. The men, Marco and the other suited figure who hadn't introduced himself, sat in the front, their presence cold and unwelcoming. Maya stared out the window, her thoughts a tangled mess. Every bump in the road felt like a reminder that she was walking down a path she had never chosen. The park was far behind now, replaced by towering gates and grand marble columns. The sedan pulled up to a massive, imposing estate, a mansion that looked like something out of a movie. The lawn was manicured to perfection, the ground surrounding the house expansive and well-kept, with a few well-placed statues adding an almost eerie elegance to the scene. Everything about this place screamed power. Maya's stomach tightened. This was a world she didn't understand, a world that was far removed from the park bench where she had first met Aria. As the car came to a stop in front of the grand entrance, the men exited without a word, leaving Maya to follow. She hesitated before stepping out, her legs trembling slightly. She had no idea what she was walking into. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it. What could anyone say now that might make a difference? The door to the mansion opened before Maya could even reach the steps, and a tall, elegant woman stepped out. She was dressed in an immaculate black dress, her dark hair cascading in waves over her shoulders. The woman's sharp features softened only when she locked eyes with Maya, but there was something about her presence that demanded respect, and maybe even fear. "Miss Williams," the woman said, her voice smooth, confident, and laced with a hint of curiosity. "I'm glad you've come." Maya's heart raced as she stood at the base of the stairs, her mind swimming with 1,000 questions. "Are you Alessandra Moretti?" she asked, her voice a little shaky. The woman's eyes flashed with something like amusement, but her smile remained composed, controlled. "I am," she replied simply, taking a step toward Maya. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." Every time Maya thought about the life she had built, her small, humble job at the bookstore, her days spent helping children with special needs, her quiet evenings alone, a pang of guilt surfaced. Her life had never been easy. There had always been struggles. Her mother's health had deteriorated over the past year, and her father had left when she was just a child, leaving her with an overwhelming sense of responsibility that weighed on her heart. Her family was falling apart, and no amount of kindness or hard work seemed to be enough to fix it. Now there was a chance, an unexpected, terrifying, but potentially life-changing chance, to break free from the cycle of struggle and uncertainty. She could give Aria the life she deserved, and maybe, just maybe, she could carve out a future for herself that wasn't filled with constant worry. Yet, she couldn't shake the nagging doubt that lingered in the back of her mind. What kind of life would this really be? Was she willing to sacrifice her freedom, her moral compass, for comfort and security? Could she justify aligning herself with a Mafia family, knowing the darkness that surrounded them? Maya didn't have all the answers. But as she sat on the worn couch in her dimly lit apartment, her thoughts turned to Aria, the little girl who had quietly accepted Maya into her world, the little girl who had slowly started to trust her, to rely on her. Aria deserved so much more than the isolation she had endured. And as much as Maya feared the path ahead, she couldn't help but feel that it was the only way to ensure Aria would never be alone again. In that moment, Maya made her choice. The next morning, Maya packed her things in haste. She hadn't told anyone, not even her best friend Sam, who had tried to call her multiple times after the meeting with Alessandra. She wasn't sure how to explain what she was about to do. No one would understand. But there was no turning back. By midday, Maya stood in front of the Moretti estate, staring up at the imposing gates. The mansion stretched before her like a labyrinth of wealth and power, every corner gleaming with the kind of luxury she had never experienced in her life. The black car that had picked her up before was waiting, its engine idling softly. She stepped forward, taking a deep breath before climbing into the back seat. The drive was uneventful, the silence pressing down on her with every passing mile. The closer they got to the estate, the more surreal it all felt. The reality of the choice she had made was slowly sinking in. She wasn't just walking into a new life. She was walking into a world she didn't understand, a world built on secrets and shadows. When the car finally came to a stop, Marco was there to greet her, his face as unreadable as ever. He led her inside, through long marble-lined hallways that seemed to echo with the weight of history and power. Maya felt her unease grow with every step. Everything in this place was too perfect, too polished. It felt like a prison made of gold, beautiful, yes, but cold and suffocating. She was shown to a room on the second floor, far from the chaos of the main house. The room was spacious and elegant, with large windows that overlooked the sprawling estate grounds. The bed was enormous, the furniture dark wood, gleaming in the soft light. For all its beauty, it felt foreign to her. Nothing like the modest, cozy space she had called home for so long. Maya felt out of place, as though she had stepped into someone else's dream, and she was no longer sure if she even wanted to be a part of it. But the room had everything she could ever need. A comfortable bed, an ensuite bathroom, clothes neatly arranged in a wardrobe, luxuries she had never had. It was everything she had been told it would be. And yet it felt hollow, empty. The first few days were a blur. Alessandra kept a careful distance, observing Maya from afar, offering guidance in her own way, and occasionally checking in on her progress with Aria. The little girl, though she seemed to recognize Maya, remained emotionally distant. She was quiet, lost in her own thoughts, and reluctant to speak much. Maya's attempts to connect were met with silence or simple nods, and there were times when Maya felt like she was intruding in a world that was not meant for her. The more time Maya spent with Aria, the more she realized how deeply the child had been isolated. Aria's world was limited to the mansion, to the walls that had been built around her for her own safety. Maya understood the reasoning behind it, the danger that came with being the daughter of someone like Alessandra, but it broke her heart to see how much Aria had been deprived of normalcy. But it was in these quiet moments, when Aria would glance up at Maya with wide eyes, trusting but unsure, that Maya felt a spark of hope. They weren't there yet, but there was a beginning. Slowly, Maya started to see a change in the little girl. Her smiles, though rare, were becoming more genuine. The distance between them was starting to shrink, and Maya knew that she could be the one to give Aria a life that was full of more than just luxury and protection. She could give her a life with connection, with kindness, and with someone who truly cared. As the days passed, Maya also began to interact more with the other members of the Moretti family. The men who worked for Alessandra were often cold and distant, their eyes calculating and sharp. There was always an undercurrent of danger around them, an unspoken threat that Maya couldn't ignore. They didn't trust her, and she didn't expect them to. In their world, loyalty was earned through silence and fear, not kindness. But it wasn't just the Mafia members who made Maya uneasy. The house itself seemed to have its own secrets. The walls, while pristine and beautiful, held an ominous presence. Every corner seemed to hide something. A past, a shadow, something that Maya couldn't quite grasp. By the end of the week, Maya found herself standing at a crossroads. She had made her choice. She had entered this world willingly, hoping that she could make a difference. But as the reality of her new life set in, she began to understand just how complicated it would be. She was now a part of something far bigger than herself, something that came with dangers she wasn't prepared for. But there was no going back. Maya was here, and she had a role to play. For Aria, for herself, and for the future that was now unfolding before her. As the mansion settled into the quiet of the night, Maya stood by the window, watching the world beyond the estate walls. She didn't know what would come next, but she had made her decision. And in this world, it was the only decision that mattered. The days at the Moretti estate were beginning to blur together in a haze of luxury and uncertainty. Maya had settled into her new role as Aria's companion, but nothing about her life here felt comfortable. The mansion's lavish surroundings were as beautiful as they were oppressive, and the people who lived and worked within these walls were cold, distant, and guarded. Every conversation felt like it was being measured, every glance scrutinized. Maya had never felt so out of place, yet at the same time, there was a strange sense of belonging. But it wasn't the walls of the mansion that kept her awake at night. It was Aria. The little girl who had been locked away in this gilded cage for most of her life, never allowed to experience the outside world, was slowly starting to open up. Every small breakthrough was a victory for Maya, and each tiny sign of progress made her heart swell. At first, Aria had been a puzzle, withdrawn, aloof, often seeming to exist in her own world. But Maya's quiet patience had started to wear down the walls that Aria had built around herself. It wasn't easy. Aria would often retreat into her repetitive behaviors, tapping her fingers against the furniture or humming to herself. But Maya didn't push. She let the little girl come to her in her own time. And slowly, ever so slowly, Aria began to trust Maya. The first time she took Maya's hand without hesitation, Maya's heart had nearly exploded with joy. The first time Aria spoke to her unprompted, her voice soft and hesitant, Maya had fought back tears. "Play with me," Aria had asked, a shy smile on her face. Since then, their days had become filled with shared moments, sitting together in silence, building elaborate sandcastles in the garden, reading picture books in the quiet of Aria's room. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Aria was opening up, showing Maya that there was so much more beneath the surface. And with each passing day, Maya's connection to the little girl grew stronger. But even as Maya worked to build this bond, she could feel the weight of Alessandra's gaze on her. The Mafia boss was a woman of few words, and her interactions with Maya were always measured, never too personal. Alessandra expected Maya to be loyal, and it was clear that she was testing her in ways that Maya didn't fully understand. It wasn't long before the first real test came. It was early one evening when Alessandra's men arrived to escort Maya. She had been sitting with Aria in the drawing room, flipping through a book that Aria wasn't particularly interested in, when Marco appeared at the door, his expression unreadable. "Miss Williams," he said with his usual calm detachment, "the boss has requested your presence." Maya stood quickly, her stomach tightening. She had gotten used to the quiet tension in Alessandra's presence, but now there was an undeniable sense of something more. Alessandra had asked for her before, but always in a calm, measured way. This time felt different. "Of course," Maya replied, trying to mask the nervousness in her voice. "Is it about Aria?" Marco's eyes flickered briefly to the little girl, who was still seated on the floor, absorbed in the book Maya had left open in front of her. "No, it's not about her. This is something else." Maya was led through the estate's labyrinthine corridors, her footsteps echoing in the quiet hallways. The deeper she went into the mansion, the more oppressive the air seemed to become. It felt as though she were entering a world she wasn't meant to be a part of, a world full of whispers, secrets, and shadows. Eventually, they stopped in front of a door that Maya had never noticed before. It was heavy and adorned with dark, intricate carvings, the kind of door that could have been straight out of a historical novel. Marco knocked twice before pushing it open. Inside, Maya was met with a scene she wasn't prepared for. The room was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from a few strategically placed lamps around the large table in the center. A group of men, sharply dressed and exuding an air of cold power, sat around the table, their conversations low and private. Maya froze at the sight. These men weren't just any businessmen. They were powerful figures in the criminal world, men who likely held the fate of entire sectors of the city in their hands. Alessandra stood at the head of the table, her posture immaculate, her dark eyes cold and calculating. She looked at Maya with a faint nod before turning back to the men. "This is Miss Williams," Alessandra introduced her, her voice calm but laced with authority. "She is here to observe." Maya's heart began to pound in her chest as she looked around the room. The men were eyeing her, sizing her up in the way that people in power often did to those they deemed insignificant. But there was nothing insignificant about this room. It was suffocating, filled with a kind of dangerous energy that made her want to flee. "Have a seat," Alessandra said, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. Maya did as she was told, her movements mechanical, her mind racing. She couldn't understand why she was there. What had she done to deserve to be in the midst of this world? The discussions began almost immediately, the men speaking in clipped, precise tones. They were talking about shipments, alliances, and deals that went far beyond Maya's comprehension. But it was the way they spoke, the casual mention of death, the cold exchange of threats, that made her stomach churn. This was a world of violence, of power plays that left no room for empathy, for kindness. Do you understand now? Alessandra's voice cut through the murmur of the conversation, pulling Maya's attention back to her. Maya blinked, her heart racing. Understand what? This is the world you've entered, Maya, Alessandra said, her eyes locking onto Maya's with an intensity that was both unsettling and mesmerizing. This is the world that Aria is a part of. This is the world that you will be a part of as long as you remain here. Loyalty is everything. Trust is everything. Maya swallowed hard, her mind reeling. She had heard rumors of the Mafia's brutality, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of it. The coldness, the ease with which these men spoke of violence, of manipulation, it was overwhelming. I understand, Maya whispered, though she wasn't sure if she truly did. Good, Alessandra replied, her gaze never leaving Maya. Because loyalty to me, to my family, is not optional. If you choose to stay, you must accept everything that comes with it. And that includes you making decisions, making sacrifices. Don't forget that, Maya. There will be no second chances. Maya nodded, her throat dry, her mind struggling to grasp the full weight of Alessandra's words. She wasn't just Aria's companion. She was a part of this world now, whether she liked it or not. And with that realization came a horrifying understanding. Maya had just been thrust into a dangerous game where loyalty wasn't given freely, and trust was a currency that could be traded at the cost of someone else's life. Later that evening, Alessandra summoned Maya to her study. Maya's heart pounded as she walked through the ornate halls of the mansion, each step feeling heavier than the last. She had heard the whispers, and now she had to face the consequences. When Maya entered the study, Alessandra was standing by the window, her silhouette outlined by the dim light outside. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break. You've heard the rumors, haven't you? Alessandra asked without turning around, her voice calm but with an edge that sent a shiver down Maya's spine. Maya swallowed hard, but she refused to back down. I've heard some things. Alessandra's gaze sharpened as she finally turned to face her. You must understand, Maya, that not everyone here sees the world the way I do. Some believe that Aria is a weakness. They think she's a liability. And you, Alessandra's eyes darkened. You've become a part of that weakness. Maya felt a cold lump form in her throat. I'm just trying to protect her. And that's what worries me, Alessandra said, her voice ice cold. Your attachment to her is admirable, but it clouds your judgment. It makes you vulnerable. And people who are vulnerable don't last long in my world. The words hit Maya like a punch to the gut. She had known the stakes were high, but she hadn't realized how high they could get. The realization settled in like a weight on her chest. She wasn't just here to protect Aria. She was a player in a deadly game, and her loyalty was being tested every day. Alessandra took a step forward, her presence overwhelming. You have a choice to make, Maya. Either you prove your loyalty, fully and without hesitation, or you become a casualty of this world. We don't have room for mistakes. Maya's mind raced, but her heart was clear. There was no turning back now. She had already committed herself to this life, to Aria. If it meant becoming more entangled in Alessandra's dangerous world, then so be it. She had no choice but to protect Aria, even if it meant becoming a part of the darkness that had already started to swallow her whole. I'll protect her, Maya said, her voice steady. At any cost. Alessandra's smile was a slow, dangerous curve. I knew you'd understand. As Maya left the study, the weight of her decision pressed down on her. She was in deeper than ever before, and the danger surrounding Aria was no longer a distant threat. It was real, and it was coming for them both. Maya had made her choice. Now she would have to live with the consequences. The air inside the Moretti estate had always been thick with tension, but tonight, It felt as if the very walls were closing in on Maya. She had grown used to the subtle threats, the whispered conversations, and the constant surveillance. But nothing had prepared her for what happened next. It started with a phone call. Marco's face was grim when he entered her room, the phone in his hand, his eyes dark with urgency. "We've lost contact with Aria," he said, his voice strained. "She's gone." Maya's heart stopped in her chest. "What do you mean, gone?" Marco's jaw tightened. "She's been taken." The minutes that followed blurred together in a haze of panic and disbelief. Maya's world, which had already felt precariously balanced, now tilted dangerously out of control. Aria was gone. The little girl she had promised to protect. The girl who had slowly come to trust her. And now someone had ripped her away, as if she were nothing more than a pawn in someone else's game. As Marco hurried to assemble a team to search for Aria, Maya was left in the cold, dark silence of her room. She could barely breathe. How could this have happened? The Moretti family was supposed to be untouchable. Alessandra had given her the power to protect Aria. Yet here she was, standing powerless in the face of something she couldn't control. Marco returned a few minutes later, his expression even graver. "We have intel. A rival faction. They've made their move." Maya's head spun. Rival faction. Who would dare target the Moretti family? And why Aria? It was all too much to process, but one thing was clear. Aria was in danger, and it was Maya's fault for not seeing it coming. By the time Maya found Alessandra, she was already in motion. The Mafia boss was standing in the grand hall, her back to Maya as she spoke to a group of her most trusted men. Her calm, calculated demeanor didn't seem to waver, even in the face of such an unimaginable threat. It was that cool, controlled nature that made Alessandra Moretti so formidable. "Where is she?" Maya asked, her voice tight, her breath still shallow from the panic. Alessandra turned slowly, her dark eyes locking onto Maya's with a chilling resolve. "We are going to get her back," she said flatly. "And you are going to help." Maya's mind raced. But how? Who would do this? Why Aria? Alessandra's lips pressed together, her eyes narrowing. "It's not about Aria. It's about me. They think they can weaken me by taking my daughter." Her voice dropped lower, a dangerous edge to it now. "They're wrong." Maya could see the fury in Alessandra's eyes, but it was controlled, a weapon honed over years of surviving in a world where survival meant calculating every move. And now she would do whatever it took to get Aria back. "We're going to get her," Alessandra repeated, her gaze flicking toward Marco, who nodded and left the room to make preparations. Maya's heart raced as Alessandra turned back to face her. "Are you ready for this, Maya? Are you ready to do what needs to be done to save Aria?" Maya hesitated, fear threatening to overtake her. The last few months had been a whirlwind, each day pulling her deeper into this Mafia world. She had already crossed lines she never thought she would, but now this? A life was at stake, and she had to decide where her loyalty truly lay. The sound of engines roaring to life outside the estate snapped Maya from her thoughts. Alessandra was already moving, her expression fierce, the mask of control slipping only slightly as she prepared for the hunt. The woman who had built an empire with fear and ruthlessness was now ready to show the world just how far she would go to protect what was hers. Maya followed closely behind her, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know if she was ready for what was about to unfold. The world she had entered was dark, dangerous, and volatile. She had always believed that good would prevail, but now she was faced with the harsh reality that in this world, good wasn't always enough. Sometimes you had to become a part of the darkness to protect the light. The black SUVs roared to life as they sped off into the night, cutting through the streets of the city. Maya barely registered the passing scenery, her mind fixated on one thing: Aria. They arrived at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The building was old, its walls crumbling with time, but it held a quiet menace, the kind of place where deals were made in shadows and lives were lost in silence. Alessandra didn't hesitate. She stormed into the warehouse, her presence demanding immediate attention. Maya followed, her heart hammering in her chest, her hands shaking. Inside, a small group of men stood waiting, members of the rival faction. They were well-dressed, but their eyes were cold, calculating. The leader of the group stood at the center, his arms crossed, a smug smile playing at the corners of his lips. His name was Rocco, a notorious figure in the city's criminal underground, and it was clear he had no fear of Alessandra. "Signora Moretti," Rocco said with a mocking bow, "I see you've come to claim what's yours. But I'm afraid your daughter is in our hands now." Maya's stomach twisted as she saw the fear flash in Alessandra's eyes, only for a moment. It was quickly replaced by an icy calm that radiated from her like a shield. "Let her go, Rocco," Alessandra said, her voice even, controlled. "This is your one chance. If you harm Aria, there will be consequences." Rocco's laugh echoed in the cold, cavernous room. "Consequences?" He scoffed. "You've already lost. Your daughter is a tool, a pawn, and she's of no use to you anymore. We have what we need." Maya stepped forward, the fury rising in her chest. "You'll regret this," she spat, her voice low and dangerous. She wasn't sure if it was the anger or the fear that made her speak, but she had crossed a line. This wasn't just about protecting Aria anymore. This was about survival. Alessandra glanced at her, her eyes flickering with something that resembled approval before she turned back to Rocco. "You don't know who you're dealing with." The standoff was unbearable. Maya could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was no longer just about Aria's safety. It was about everything. Loyalty, power, survival. And then, as quickly as it had all begun, it escalated. A gunshot rang out, and Maya's world shifted. In an instant, Rocco collapsed, the gunshot reverberating through the warehouse like a warning. The chaos erupted around her, but Alessandra remained calm, her eyes locked on the men who now scrambled to react. "You're a dead man," Alessandra's voice was ice-cold as she watched Rocco's men scatter, realizing too late that they had made a fatal mistake. Maya's heart was in her throat. Her mind raced, and she couldn't understand how everything had escalated so quickly. In the chaos she saw Aria, standing in the corner, unharmed but terrified. Maya's legs carried her toward the girl, her body moving on instinct. "Aria," Maya whispered, her voice shaking. "You're safe now." But as they began to leave, Maya felt the weight of the choice she had just made. She had crossed a line. There was no going back. She had chosen Aria, but at what cost? As the doors slammed shut behind them, Alessandra turned to Maya. "You did well. You proved your loyalty." But in Maya's chest, a cold realization began to form. She had stepped into a world where her loyalty meant more than her safety, and she had just become more deeply entangled in the underworld than she ever intended. Now there was no turning back. The world had shifted on its axis. Maya had always known that joining the Moretti family would change her life, but she had never imagined how deeply it would affect her. The night of Aria's kidnapping felt like a distant memory now, but the echoes of that brutal reality would stay with her forever. They had fought for her, and they had won. When they returned to the estate, Aria was shaken but unharmed. Maya's heart had never been so full of relief as when she saw the little girl's wide, scared eyes soften upon realizing she was safe. Maya had promised Aria that nothing would harm her, that she would always protect her. And she had kept that promise. As Maya held Aria close, the relief settled into something deeper, a bond that could not be broken by anything, not even the violence of the world they now lived in. Aria clung to her with a trust that felt like a miracle, as though the worst was over and they could return to the quiet peace they had once shared. But Maya knew better. Nothing was ever truly over in this world. When Alessandra entered the room, she was surrounded by a quiet, almost palpable energy. The chaos of the warehouse raid still hung in the air, but Alessandra's presence was commanding, and everything seemed to fall into place when she spoke. Her gaze softened only slightly as she observed Maya and Aria together. "You did well, Maya," Alessandra said, her voice steady, betraying none of the raw emotions that had flickered in her eyes earlier. "You proved your loyalty to Aria and to me." Maya nodded, her body still trembling from the adrenaline, but she didn't trust herself to speak. Words felt insufficient in this moment. She had done what she had promised, but the cost was starting to settle in. She had saved Aria, but now she was irrevocably tied to a world of violence, of power, and of the cold loyalty that ran deep within the Moretti family. "I didn't have a choice," Maya whispered, looking up at Alessandra, her voice barely a tremor. "I couldn't let them hurt her." Alessandra's eyes softened, but the steel remained. "No, you didn't. And now you're part of this family. What you've done today, it's not something you can walk away from. But you've earned your place here. You've shown the loyalty we value most." The words were both a promise and a warning. Maya felt the weight of them settle deep in her chest. She had given everything to protect Aria, but in doing so, she had stepped deeper into a world she had never fully understood. The next few days passed in a blur. Maya stayed close to Aria, who had become more affectionate, more trusting with each passing hour. They spent time in the garden, in the library, in Aria's room, wherever they could escape the watchful eyes of the estate's other inhabitants. For the first time since Aria's abduction, Maya allowed herself to feel the quiet joy of simply being with a girl. But the danger wasn't gone. It lingered in the corners of the estate, in every guarded conversation, in the cold stares from some of the Mafia men. Maya had earned Alessandra's approval, but she knew that loyalty wasn't something you could simply earn once. It had to be proved again and again. She was no longer just Aria's companion. She was a part of the Moretti family, a part of a world that demanded more than anyone should ever give. One evening, after a long day spent in the gardens with Aria, Maya was summoned to the study once more. When she entered, Alessandra was sitting behind her massive desk, papers scattered in front of her, her posture regal and commanding. The same cold, calculated expression she had worn the first day Maya met her was in place. But this time, something else flickered in her eyes. Approval, perhaps, or maybe something deeper. "Maya," Alessandra said, her tone as steady as always. "We've had a few complications since the rescue mission. But your loyalty has been noted. You've proven yourself to me and to Aria." Maya stood silently, her heart racing as the weight of the moment hung in the air. She was still processing the full extent of her decision. It had seemed so simple in the moment, protecting Aria, keeping her safe from harm, but now it was clear. She was no longer just a caretaker. She was part of something far bigger, something dangerous. "I've spoken to the family," Alessandra continued, her gaze never leaving Maya. "You're not just Aria's companion anymore. You're an integral part of the operations now. You'll be expected to contribute in ways you hadn't anticipated. I trust you've understood this." Maya nodded slowly, the weight of Alessandra's words settling in. The Mafia wasn't just a job. It was a family. And once you were in, there was no leaving. "I understand," Maya said softly, her voice steady, though her mind was racing. She had made her decision. She would protect Aria, no matter the cost, no matter how deeply it tied her to the world she feared. Over the next few weeks, Maya's role in the family began to shift. She wasn't just assisting Aria anymore. She became involved in meetings, in overseeing parts of the family's vast business dealings, sitting quietly in the background while the men discussed strategy and deals. She wasn't expected to speak much, but her presence was noted. She was there, learning, absorbing the harsh lessons of a world governed by loyalty, manipulation, and violence. It was all happening so quickly. Maya had become a part of something she never wanted, but now that she was here, she couldn't imagine leaving. The bond she had with Aria was stronger than anything she'd ever experienced, and as much as it terrified her, she knew she couldn't walk away from that. She spent every free moment with Aria, the child who had become her entire world. As the days passed, she saw more of Aria's true nature. The girl who had been hidden away, locked in a world of silence and isolation. Aria's emotional walls were beginning to crack, and Maya was the one to help her rebuild, piece by piece, into someone who could face the world with confidence. Maya had made her choice, and it wasn't just about protecting Aria anymore. It was about loyalty. Loyalty to a girl who had captured her heart, loyalty to a family that had embraced her in its own twisted way. And with that loyalty came danger. Maya knew she was bound to this world, tied to the Moretti family in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. As she sat beside Aria one evening, the girl's head resting against her shoulder as they watched the sun set over the sprawling estate grounds, Maya allowed herself a moment of peace. She thought back on everything that had brought her here. The choices, the sacrifices, the moments of doubt. She had been naive to think her kindness would be enough to keep her safe from the consequences of this world. But as she looked at Aria, who was slowly beginning to smile again, Maya knew one thing. She had made the right choice. For Aria, for herself, for the life they could build together. It had all been worth it. Even if the cost was steep. Maya didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time in a long while, she felt certain of one thing. Her life, though dangerous, though filled with darkness, was hers. And for Aria, she would face it head-on, no matter what. The price of loyalty was high. But for Aria, Maya would pay it gladly.